I'm going to start my tale talking about my life in horse racing, and I want to begin at the beginning. That's a good place. When I was 12 years old, 1960. I'm 72 right now, 60 years ago. And I remember just like it was yesterday, and you'll all go through this when you reach 72. I hope you do. And my dad and I lived in Chicago, and we used to go to Washington Park Racetrack, and I'd go with him. He'd give me $6, so I'd bet three $2 bets on something. Back then, they just had the win, place, and show and the double. That's all they had. Now there's so many different bets. It's really amazing now. And so I'd go, and all he did was buy the program, and he would buy the green sheet, it was called, and it had the Clocker report. And the green sheet back then had each individual horse had a comment, a one-line comment. It had best bets. It also had long shots. It had daily double picks. So my dad wasn't handicapping. He didn't have a racing form. He was just kind of picking numbers, colors, names. I didn't know what he was doing, but I enjoyed spending time with my dad, and we had fun at the racetrack. And I loved the horses because I liked riding horses. We used to go to Sun Valley in the summer, and I'd ride horses every day, and I really liked riding horses, and I just liked being around them. So we go down the paddock quite a bit and look at them before the races started. So we were leaving the track one day, maybe the third trip, and I thought somebody had dumped the Sun-Times. The Sun-Times, if you're not from Chicago, is the only newspaper that I know of that opens like a book. You know how newspapers are kind of goofy, and it's hard to open them, and you flip them around, and well, the Sun-Times opens just like a magazine. It's beautiful, and I'm surprised more papers aren't like the Sun-Times. Well, I thought somebody dumped the Sun-Times in the garbage, so I thought, well, on the way home, I can read the Sun-Times. That'll be nice. So I pull this thing out. Now I'm 12 years old now. I pull this thing out of the garbage, and it's the racing form. And I said, Dad, what's this? He said, oh, it's the racing paper. He didn't even know that it was called the Daily Racing Form because he never purchased it before. So we get home, and luckily, I guess luckily or not luckily, maybe it ruined our lives. I'm not sure. I don't think it did, because we both loved racing all our lives. It had an explanation page on how to read the racing form, because each line is a race, and it explained that to us beautifully. Starting with on the left is the date, and then going all the way to the right, each line is a race, and it shows you the jockey and the weight that the horse was carrying, and the odds, and blah blah blah, and then the position at the quarter and the half and the eighth and the finish, and different things. And that was all in this racing form, and all these numbers and things, and it was so complicated. It was so confusing. It's like Dad and I looked at this and went, this is amazing. What is this? So Saturday when we got home, and Sunday and Monday, we looked at this thing. And then finally Tuesday, my mom said, what are you boys doing? What have you been doing since Saturday? What are you reading? And we showed her, and she got interested because she liked math. And she said, oh, this is interesting. Wow, this is horse racing? We said, yes. That people use this to pick winners. And she said, how? And Dad said, well, I'm going to find out, because I'm going to buy a book tomorrow. So Dad, over his lunch break, he bought a book on handicapping the races. And that's how we got started. And then we just began. We began to learn the basics of handicapping. We got the Turf Digest delivered to the house. Ray Talbot had all these handicapping systems that he had. We tried everything. We tried them all. That's what you do at the beginning. You try every system known to man, because you don't know what you're doing. And then you guys, if you haven't played the horses, you'll probably do the same thing. But that's fine. It's fine to experiment. It's good to experiment, but don't bet money. It's good to experiment and see if your systems are working. and check the results. And then once you see that you're winning, then go ahead and start betting real money. Anyway, and then we started playing and we started winning. We started doing pretty good. And then we had all summer. And the wonderful thing about Arlington Park in the 60s, when I was a freshman in high school through my senior year, is the Arlington Park in the summer had what's called the Mid-American Triple Crown. And the Mid-American Triple Crown was, wow, how do I describe it? Well, it was the Mid-American Triple Crown, so it was after the Triple Crown that we know, the Kentucky Derby, the Preakness, and the Belmont. And it was after the first part of June, so it was later in June. And there were $300,000 races. Well, back in the early 60s, a $100,000 race was a big deal. Well, Arlington Park had these four three-year-olds. And so it was like the Triple Crown, but at Arlington Park. And every year when I was in high school, one horse would come in, and we'd get to see this. It turned out to be a famous racehorse that turned out to be a great stud in most cases. The first was Northern Dancer. Buck Passer came to town. Buck Passer was my favorite horse. He was absolutely gorgeous. And Buck Passer, he was so calm. He never showed any sweat. Even when it was hot and humid in Chicago, he was so beautiful. And he would walk around the paddock, and I'm not exaggerating now, I'm not embellishing. He would stop and look at us, look at people, watching him in the paddock. And one time he stopped and looked at my dad, and it was like, hey Murph, hey, the Murphys are here, hey, how you doing? I'm not going to pay much, but bet on me anyway. What the heck, come on. And he kept going. And then when he went on the track, Raleigh Baeze, his jockey, said, he would stop before he came on the track. He would stop like a prince, and he would look around. He would look up and look back at the fans, and he'd look to the right, and he might be there 2 or 3 or 4 minutes or 5 minutes, and then he'd finally go. And Raleigh said, I just let Bucky take me, and then he'd finally go onto the track and warm up. And he won 15 races in a row during that stretch. And 3 of those races were the 3 races at Arlington Park, the Mid-American Triple Crown. And I learned what a herd instinct was, because Buck Passer hardly ever won by more than like a half a length or a head or a neck or a nose. And it was explained to me that that's the herd instinct. Horses naturally, the whole concept of herd instinct is to protect yourself. And horses protect themselves in the wild from like cougars, mountain lions jumping on their back and killing them. And so they want to stay with the herd. And so when you have a horse that gets the lead, and then you see suddenly horses are coming at him, well, he's waiting because he doesn't want to get away from the herd. And so you'll have, they call it seconitis, but it's really not in many cases seconitis. It's that they don't want to get away from the herd. But it's frustrating if you're an owner, a jockey, or a bettor, or a trainer, because the horse is finishing second, and if you bet to win, you don't win. So, but Buck Passer, the jockey had to time it just right. Raleigh Baeze. Well, he did time it right 15 times in a row, because Bucky won 15 in a row. But he would just barely win, and those 3 at Arlington Park were fantastic. Because Phil George Jeff, here they come into the stretch, here comes Buck Passer, and Buck Passer is coming, and he just gets there every time, and he won by a nose, a neck, and I think a half a length, those 3 races. Now, how do I remember that? It's because that was my favorite horse ever, because he was so absolutely gorgeous. My dad and I had just purchased a book on conformation, like 2 weeks before Buck Passer started this run, and we brought the book to his second race, and we looked and compared and looked at the book, and Dad and I both said, I remember my dad said, this might be the perfect racehorse. And I said, because we looked at everything that was saying in our book on conformation, and I said, I think he is. Look at that, Dad. And we talked about just all the different angles on his hip and the back and the withers and everything. And then about 10 years ago, maybe less, somebody said that very thing, that he was considered just about the perfect racehorse conformation wise. Buckpasser. He wasn't a great stud. I'm sure he thought he was great. As we all do. But I'm sure he thought he was great. But he was he had some good ones. But Doc kind of my favorite racehorse by far. So anyway, what we had that summer, it was a wonderful 4 years because we had Northern Dancer winning all three. And so we got to watch that marvelous racehorse, who was a tremendous stud. Buckpasser, Tom Rolfe, Roman Brother, and later, after I went to college at Iowa State, Dr. Fager, who broke the track record. Oh, I want to go back. So I got to go back to one thing. Buckpasser broke the world record for a mile at, I think, 1:33 and 1 or 2. But he barely won because of the herd instinct is strong. And Brawley Baeza said, I'm telling you the truth, that if this horse had ever tried, if he'd ever tried and worked, that he could have gone 132 and something. He was sure of it, and I believe it. But anyway, getting back, I went off course there for a second. Anyway, but it was what a wonderful 4 years, because Dad and I didn't realize at the time that we were watching these tremendous racehorses that came to town, and we were able to see them up close and personal all summer. You know, the ones I mentioned. But that was the beginning, but the thing about it, my dad and I, every Friday, we would, 7 months of the year for thoroughbreds, and then harness racing at Washington Park in the winter. But the thoroughbreds were our favorite. And the racing form came out the night before. Now it's 2 days before. But the night before, we would go to this newsstand that was Chicago Heights. It was about 15-20 minutes from the house. And we'd get there, and there'd be like 25 people waiting for the racing form. And somebody would say, sometimes it was Dad, sometimes it was me, here comes the truck. And what a wonderful moment that was, because our racing forms were coming. And the truck would come around the corner, and we were all like children, all these adults, all these people waiting for that sheet, the Bible, the racing Bible, the racing form. And the guy would throw them out, and then the guy would cut the band, and he'd start, okay, guys, okay, get in line. Okay, guys, don't push, don't shove. I have such a great memory of that. And we'd get the form, we'd get in the car, and Dad, if it was night, usually 7:30, 8 o'clock. If it was summer, it was still usually light enough. He'd say, okay, son, open the form. And he maybe would have to turn on the overhead light, in the car. And he'd say, go to the first race, son. And I'd start going through. And by the time we got home, we'd have gone through all 9 races. All 9 we would have gone through. And, that's just a tremendous memory, a wonderful, wonderful memory. And so then my dad and I would have Friday night, to handicap. And of course we would, and we handicap then, and we'd handicap in the morning. And, wow. But that's the beginning. That's my intro into horse racing. And if you haven't handicapped, and you haven't played the horses, in the next few parts, I'm going to talk to you about pace makes the races next. Pace makes the race is the axiom, and it's the most important thing that you need to learn, and that will be the next part. So, and then there'll be the last part will be just your introduction to how in the heck do you learn to handicap, and I'll let you know in the third part. So, good racing, and I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.